Okay, so I'm going to start in '76 where I was a police officer here at SIU. Then I'm going to fast forward to 1987. My grandparents are from the Northeast Side, owned a store, but my grandmother died and we buried her in 1987. I had a 1985 two-seat Fiero. She's buried in the graveyard north of here. Can't think of the name of it. Anyway, my eyes, as when you have funerals, and you love your loved one, you're usually swollen and so forth and so on. So I was at my grandmother's house on the Northeast Side, on North Marion, 807 North Marion Street. And I have cousins there. He had a girlfriend that lived on this street, which is called the Island, that lived in that building back in the day. So he wanted to visit her. I only have 2 seats in Fiero, so I drove from there. It's a 5-speed Fiero. There are so many, it's short blocks here. These aren't city blocks. So you can't hardly get out of second gear. So I drove from North Marion Street, which would be down through the levee. There's 2 stop signs. And then there's, you turn right. There's 1 stoplight at the tracks, before the tracks, 1 over the tracks, 1 after you get over the tracks to turn left to the Island. Remember the year is 1987. Can't get out of barely second gear because there's too many stops. So I park right here on this side of the building. This was Kinko's at the time. We get out and walk. About then, I know, a police officer followed me all the way from the Northeast Side. And after I got out, and me and my cousin crossed the street, because we were visiting his girlfriend, we had just came from the funeral, my eyes are puffy and swollen and red, because I was really supposed to be going to get a pizza for my mom to take back. Thank you letters we were writing. But anyway, I made that detour. The cop stops after I'm out and he crossed the street here, and he asked me for my driver's license. And what a normal person would ask, why? Because I am no longer a driver and I'm across the street about to open a door and enter a building, so therefore I'm a pedestrian. And he tells me, just do it. I don't have to give you a reason. I was like, oh, really? So he said, you just shut your mouth and do what I said. Me being me, I was like, you need to give me a reason. He spun me around because it was like in the fall. It was December, so I had a leather jacket on. He just spun me around really quickly, pulled it over my head, had me on my knees. Now, during this time, I was also a lieutenant for the Department of Corrections at Shawnee Correctional Center, which I happen to have self-defense, firearms training. I taught these things. So my instinct told me, with my head covered, to take my elbow, and it went up in his crouch, and he got up off of me. And I got up, wiped off my knees because they were damaged a little bit from the concrete. And he said, well, you're arrested. And I said, for what? And about that time, Scotty, another black police, Carbondale police, he knew me from when I was on the police force over here earlier years. Carmen, what are you doing? And I said, well, I guess I'm getting arrested for being black going into a building, because I'm sarcastic like that. And the young cop, he was a neophyte. He steady arresting me and cuffing me. Well, again, I must say, I was an ex-cop and I worked in a prison. I carried cuffs all the time, but he obviously did not know how to cuff, because you can fold my hands right in, and if you don't cuff right, you can just slide my hand. So I just, after you got done being a smart butt, you want to try this again, pal? Because I'm mad. Anyway, he finally does, and he never gets it right. He puts him in a squad car, goes to the station, puts me in a room. I'm calling NAACP and everybody else, but I was also a founding member of National Association of Blacks in Criminal Justice. So I'm calling my people. I don't know whether they overheard or whatever. He finally let me out about an hour and a half later and posted $50. I never went anywhere but the old police station here in Carbondale. So fast forward, they said I decided to fight it because I didn't like how he treated me, and I'm still maintaining, you didn't give me a reason. I'm a pedestrian. So I hired this lawyer named Brandon Lockwood, who is famous for breaking up the corruption of judges in Chicago. So we get ready to go to Murfreesboro to court, and Mr. Lockwood asked the city attorney, the officers there, do you want to just dismiss this case? The officer interrupts and says, no, you don't dismiss a case when it's like having the lottery ticket, winning lottery ticket, and you throw it in the trash can. That's what he said. So we go on to the courtroom and we have the trial, and the judge is sitting up there listening intently, and the officer and my lawyer tells him about, it's hard to get out of second gear because what was his rationale for stopping me or even questioning me because I'm no longer, he said he thought I was drunk. But he never one time asked me to take that test, and asked me to walk a line, never asked for a breath test. The rationale again was because her eyes were red and swollen. That is generally what happens when you come from a funeral and you've been crying because I was very close to my grandmother. So I get on and I tell the judge just what I told you all. I'm driving, I get out, I'm a pedestrian, across the street, getting ready to open up a door to an apartment building, and he approaches me and asks me for my driver's license. I, like a reasonable person, would ask, why? Because I am a pedestrian. He said, because I can. So I go and explain that whole story again. And at the end of that, my story is really short. At the end of that, the judge gives everybody a 15 or 20-minute lecture on the rights of taxpayers and private citizens, because he had no right to stop me as a pedestrian, tackle me, because he told the judge that I hit him and he went 6 feet in the air, which was an exaggeration. I'm sure, males are sensitive in that area, and he probably did planching maybe, but it was hardly 6 feet. And so after that, the city of Carbondale kept sending these $50 to my house. I live in Marion. And it got so bad till I just finally came over here to the city office, I forget, city manager, and I tell him, I brought the checks. You keep sending me. I only bonded out one time, it's $50. Oh, don't ever worry about it. We can go to lunch or something. I said, no. NAACP was wanting me to be fight for them, because apparently during that time they had a lot of problems with police officers stopping black females. However, I did not want to do it because there again, I worked for the state of Illinois. I was a lieutenant for the Department of Correction. I just wanted to clear my name and get back to the business of doing my job. So after that, I really never had any problem with the city of Carbondale. I didn't want to be a poster child for women either. But that is my experience that made me remember. I had another story, but it made me remember, because when I pulled up in that parking lot, all of those memories came flooding back. And that is it. Okay, I didn't live here. My twin brother stayed with my grandparents, but they had a store called Russell's Grocery. My grandfather had it, and my great-grandfather, his name was David Russell, the store being Russell's Grocery. I think in 1920 or 30 they moved here from Dumaine via Alabama, Birmingham, from what I understand. And so they had a store, and back then there were several stores and businesses on the northeast side, black businesses, restaurants, Jabos, and a few other, Hillsman store, a whole lot of stores. Also, across the street later on, as in most towns, it started phasing out the black neighborhoods. And across the street, I forget the name of the store, it's not Hillsman's, but it's called something else. It was catacornered, I want to say Larch in North Marion, and I may have the street wrong. but it was cat-a-corner from my grandmother's store. The Muslims moved in and during the '68, and they took over the store and had a temple and sold bean pies. So that was different for me, given I grew up in Carbondale with all this and went to the AME Methodist Church because my grandmother went there and my grandmother was the only child. Let me just say that, from the Russells that owned the store. My grandfather that she married was Schaffner. So her name was Vantra Schaffner, and he was one of the first crane operators or something with the train. He worked for the train, but then he had a stroke. So that's some of my earliest memories. But I do remember on Washington Street during the '68, there were the Black Panthers there. And there was a rich history. You know, Dick Gregory went to SIU here, but during the time that I do remember the Black Panthers there, everybody at that time wore a Martin Luther King. I had a medallion and it spun around, you know, with all. So I had a Martin Luther King thing on it. '68 he got killed, right? The Black Panthers are over here on Washington Street on the corner. And on Marion Street, about maybe 5 or 6 blocks down, are the Muslims. So I'm hearing their story, and I'm hearing the Panther story. I have a brother in Chicago because I came from 11, and he was about to do the Panthers. I joined them. So, you know, and coming from Marion, Illinois, who at the time, it's like walking back to the plantation, for lack of a better way to put it. It's all white. We were a community within a community, and Carbondale was more liberal because they had the university, which was a little bit more diverse. So I actually lived 2 different places, but my mind was always that of Angela Davis because of the way I grew up in a segregated school in Marion. Then I came over here, you know, and my grandparents were the more affluent. Back then you had layers of black folks, and I don't even know how to put it, but anyway, they were the more prosperous. So it was like living 2 different worlds. And I had torn feelings. I liked Malcolm X's philosophy, but I was more of an Angela Davis, Black Panthers, and I wasn't real sure about the Muslims because they were so together, uniformed, but I didn't really. All I know is I was a marcher, and I always stayed in school, stayed in trouble in school because I always marched. Because I just didn't like the way, I came from 2 different worlds, the affluent here, and then in Marion, my dad, I came from a biracial background there, so my dad owned some stores, and we have a private cemetery in Thompsonville. So it's never like I was on the bottom, although I've never been treated the way I actually felt, because there's levels like of affluent down to those who, if I was poor, I didn't know it. But if I had to say, I probably was poor in Marion because there's 11 of us. But I came over here to another world. But I was always an activist. I got in trouble in the high school over there for marching. I got in trouble for starting a minorities club. I got in a Black Histories course, which does not exist today. There are no black teachers there at all, except for one dean of students. And I said at some point I'm going to have to. I've reconciled with myself. From kindergarten through 5th grade, I was in a segregated school, Marion. During that time, I had a black principal, Mrs. Claire Kirk. My aunt, Russell Duncan, was my teacher. There was a black cook, and there was a black janitor. And the school was called Douglas School with 2 S's, as Frederick Douglass. And so when we desegregated, we went. It was traumatic for my sister. She just came home every single day. My mother had to take her back to kindergarten or 1st grade, whatever it was. Me, you went from all black K through 6th grade to this school that no longer exists there called Logan. And suddenly you're the only black person in the class. And so now I'm getting educated on 2 levels. I usually used to go to the school gym because I played clarinet, but that was only for a couple hours and then come back, bust back, or drove the car back. But now I stay there all day. Now I'm in a class, and every time they got on a subject, watered down subject, because I actually knew a little more than what they taught me. It wasn't always, you didn't always learn what was in the history books, that you actually learned some real history. Every time they got on the history about slaves, everybody would look at you like you had first-hand knowledge. And I'm like, I think I was probably in the 6th grade, I'm like, I don't even believe this. Even back then, it just boggled my mind. I know y'all don't think I know all about, because there's always a picture of a woman that was half clothed with her breasts, and I'm like, really? I'm looking at the same picture you're looking at, so I don't know anything about that.